رب رحيم مشفق.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We welcome all our international guests from all over the world to another exciting episode of Dawah Ilallah, as we discover a way that we can present Islam based on the Sunnah and based on what the Quran actually teaches, and not our own wisdom and our own ideas. So we welcome all our friends from all over the world who have decided and chosen this next half an hour to learn how they can bring others to Islam, and specifically how to bring others to submission to the one true God. By default, when you bring people to Islam, to Allah, they will automatically begin to follow Islam, and when they follow Islam, they will want to love and respect the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And we've seen in the series up to this point that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ never claimed to be anything else other than a prophet, and that he never wrote the Quran, that he is not the originator of the Quran, but he is simply the messenger. And so we have seen throughout history that many of the books have been distorted. They have been corrupted in one way or the other, with additions or deletions or whatever have been altered. The texts have been altered because people began to worship the messenger instead of the message, or the one who sent the message. So they start to worship the messenger, the voice. That's the one they worship, instead of following the one who actually sent the message in the first place. And this is where they all went wrong. If you think of every religion in the world that has gone wrong, the person who gave the message, who gave the declaration, is the one that they started to worship, or turn into a demigod, or turn into a god of some sort, somewhere along the line. And may Allah guide them back to the truth. May Allah guide you and give you the guidance that you need and that you require to come back to Islam properly, and to take your Shahada all over again, and to declare that there is no other God worthy of worship other than Allah, and that Muhammad is simply a messenger of Allah.
رب رحيم مشفق.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We welcome all our international guests from all over the world to another exciting episode of Dawah Ilallah, as we discover a way that we can present Islam based on the Sunnah and based on what the Quran actually teaches, and not our own wisdom and our own ideas. So we welcome all our friends from all over the world who have decided and chosen this next half an hour to learn how they can bring others to Islam, and specifically how to bring others to submission to the one true God. By default, when you bring people to Islam, to Allah, they will automatically begin to follow Islam, and when they follow Islam, they will want to love and respect the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And we've seen in the series up to this point that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ never claimed to be anything else other than a prophet, and that he never wrote the Quran, that he is not the originator of the Quran, but he is simply the messenger. And so we have seen throughout history that many of the books have been distorted. They have been corrupted in one way or the other, with additions or deletions or whatever have been altered. The texts have been altered because people began to worship the messenger instead of the message, or the one who sent the message. So they start to worship the messenger, the voice. That's the one they worship, instead of following the one who actually sent the message in the first place. And this is where they all went wrong. If you think of every religion in the world that has gone wrong, the person who gave the message, who gave the declaration, is the one that they started to worship, or turn into a demigod, or turn into a god of some sort, somewhere along the line. And may Allah guide them back to the truth. May Allah guide you and give you the guidance that you need and that you require to come back to Islam properly, and to take your shahada all over again, and to declare that there is no other God worthy of worship other than Allah, and that Muhammad is simply a messenger of Allah. So may Allah guide you to that truth. We have seen it many, many times when we look at the Quran from whatever perspective, from history, geography, archaeology, from a mathematician's point of view, from a scientific point of view, that the Quran stands the test of time. No matter how you put it, it'll stand the test of time. There was this man in America who challenged the world to burn the Quran. Remember that man in America who had burned the Quran Day? And I had the privilege of meeting this man and speaking with him and to debate him on a radio station. And he said that he has found the Quran guilty of charges of heresy. And I said to him, well, if we're going to have a trial and you found the Quran guilty of lying, then we need to put your book on trial at the same time. And he said that when he finds the Quran guilty, he is going to burn it, shoot it, or drown it. That was the sentence that he was going to put on the Quran. That was what he said. He's a crazy. He's a nutcase, and from America. And I said to him, fine, we'll have a proper trial. Then we have to have lawyers and judges and everything. And of course, he refused to do that. So all he made is made wild accusations. But when we actually took him down to it and said, fine, let's put these two books on trial. Let's put the Quran and the Bible on trial and see which one passes, and ask the peers of the world. We get a Hindu, we get a Christian, we get a Buddhist, we get an atheist, we get an agnostic. Let them sit in the jury seats like you're sitting now. Let's see what actually happens. Of course, he refused to do that because he knew that it would not stand the test of time. If we took the magnifying glass of science out, it would fail dismally. I don't even have to go through the hundreds of thousands of errors that are to be found in science alone in the Bible. What about archaeology? Things that it speaks about that never happened. Historical events never took place. People that no one has any record of ever speaking to or seeing. Do you know there's no evidence that Jesus Christ, according to the Bible, according to the research that has been found by external sources, even existed? Because there was no such person as Jesus Christ. There was only a man by the name of Isa, son of Mary. So if you're looking for Jesus, you won't find him, because there's no such name. So if you look for a name that doesn't exist, if you go to a telephone directory, imagine you're looking for Mr. Smith, and you're looking under Thomas. Do you think you're going to find Smith under Thomas? Of course not. You look under S for Smith. And so if you're looking for Jesus of history, according to the external evidences, the last place you're going to look is under J, because there's no such person. It doesn't make any sense when you look at it in that sense. Not even the names are correct. If you want to know if this is true, because many people have debated this issue over the years and say, well, why do you not call him Jesus? Why do you call him Isa? Go to a Jew. Go to your rabbis. Go to a non-practicing Jew, one of the secular Jews, and say to him, what do you call Jerusalem? He'll say, oh, there's no such place. Never heard of Jerusalem. We call it Jerusalem. Yeah, there's no J. There's no J that they use for any of the words. So we know for sure that when a Christian says, if you say in the name of Jesus, the demon will come out, well, guess what? That demon is laughing, because he doesn't know what you're talking about. Because how can you drive out a demon in the name of your God who doesn't exist? Because the name is even wrong. Do you know that I've often spoken about the story when I was a Christian? I was praying for this one woman who was supposedly possessed or whatever it might have been. And she said to me, I asked her what's the demon's name, and the demon said Jesus Christ. And that's when I realized, okay, it can happen. What's stopping a demon having that name? So many of the accusations that have been made against the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and against Islam is saying, well, inside the Kaaba, there were these different idols, and one of them was named Allah. Therefore, Allah is an idol. So you can't just say because that name happened to appear, maybe one of the idols. Who knows what names there were there? Who knows? Is that the proof that it is a false god? Because there are many false people walking around with names that don't apply to them in the real world. There's many people calling themselves Jesus. I went to school with about 4 of them. In my classroom, there was lots of Jesuses in my classroom, but they weren't Jesus. They were just called Jesus. That was their name. There was Emmanuel's as well in my class, which is the proper name that the Prophet Isa, peace be upon him, was supposed to be called according to the Bible. Do you know that? What did the angel come and say to Miriam? May Allah be pleased with her. The angel came to her and said, you will have a child and you will call him Emmanuel. And so when they had the baby, what did they call him? Jesus. So one has to ask, why can't you even remember what the command of Allah was if you're going to go according to the Christian text? We don't find this problem in the pages of the Quran. We find that it actually makes sense. You can't, no matter how you look at the Quran, it survives. It makes sense. Do you know that they talk about the mountain of God in the Bible? Describes it in the Old Testament. It's referred to again in the New Testament. Describes what you will see at the mountain of God. It will explain there was a valley, and under the valley there were palm trees growing. By the palm trees is a river. The valley of God that is spoken about in Israel is nowhere to be found. Nowhere. Doesn't fit that description at all. Go to Saudi Arabia and it's right there. The description is 100% accurate on the centimeters and millimeters and miles that it describes in the Bible. So even their geography fails, but it supports exactly what we as Muslims understand. There's a series that inshallah I wanted to do, but perhaps we'll do this in the future. It's called Mecca in the Bible, where Mecca is spoken about clearly. The description is spoken clearly. But they've interpreted it, Christians and Jews have interpreted it to be what is modern day Jerusalem. But it's not. It's Mecca, where it is. The descriptions are what you will see there. The description of there's a rock that has got a split in it. How it is split is not found anywhere, nowhere to be found in Palestine. But it's to be found exactly as described in Saudi Arabia, in Mecca. Where the palm trees are, where the olive groves are, how they were in those days and still are to this day. So we find that if you analyze the Quran, it stands the test of all tests, no matter how you look at it. And that is amazing, subhanAllah. You see, the Quran is not a book of science, it's not a book of mathematics, it's not a book of biology, it's not a book of archaeology, it's not a book of history, it's a book of life. You know, sometimes when you look at other texts, you just look at it and you go, how did people even get this? Where did they get this from? How did they even think like this? And then you have to remember, oh, but that time that these books were written, that was the common thoughts of the day. During the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, they didn't know the earth was round. They didn't know anything about sailing. Don't get me wrong, they knew about sailing. But they didn't know about sailing like we know today. Do you know that in the middle of the ocean there's fresh water? Did you know that? In the middle of the sea, you come across these springs in the middle of the ocean where there's wells and you can scoop up fresh water and drink it. How would the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ know that? Where there'd be separations between the salt and the fresh water. It's not an estuary, it's the middle of the ocean. You need to take a break. When we get back from the break, we'll continue inshallah. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh and welcome back. We have been speaking before the break about simple things that we have been given in the Quran that prove that the Quran is the genuine transmission from our Creator to human beings. It has not been subtitled out. It hasn't been rewritten. You know when you watch those old karate movies, the mouth is moving, the dialogue comes later. And you just go, this is so badly done, so badly dubbed. It's not like that, the Quran. You don't see the mouth moving and then the dialogue is totally different. The mouth moving and the dialogue is exactly the same. You don't have to go, okay. You go, oh, all right. You accept it because it makes sense. It's perfect sense. So let's move on. We are going through the book Dawah Ilallah. And we are examining how the author has given us an easy to follow system for how we can be successful in the dawah we're doing. Like we said in the series, what's the point of rewriting a whole new series when there's already one that is good enough? And so we're building the framework for this whole series that will continue around this. And we're more than halfway through this book already. So let's continue on what he brings up in the next aspect when he says, we now look into the other different aspects that make up dawah. And so our brother will continue reading from what he writes next.
One of the aspects is to call people to the right religion. The best way of life is to sincerely worship Allah alone and to perform the required rituals. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "And they were commanded not, but that they should worship Allah and worship none but Him alone, and perform as-salah and give zakah. And that is the right religion." Surah 98, verse 5.
Jazakallah khair. So another important point that we have to follow in dawah is to inform people that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was this founder of this new belief system that we have in the world today. His job was to tell people about what this belief system was, and that there is only one belief system acceptable to Allah. There's only one structural system that Allah will accept, and that is Islam. It's not a building, it's not a temple, it's not a shrine, it's Allah. So he's calling people to turn away from all the things that you associate with God. Do you understand that? Not just names that you associate, but things that you associate. People associated the temple as God. So they go to the Jewish temple and think God lived there. Some people say when they're talking, and we must be cautious what we are saying, we are going to the house of God. He does not live there. God is out of His creation. He's not confined to a spot. You understand? So when we say words like the Christians often say, "I'm going to the house of God now," He does not live in the church. He doesn't stay in the temple. So Allah is saying that He is establishing this belief system that they are to worship only Allah, not in a house, not in a place. That's why we have been given every place on earth as a place of worship. You know, the Christian, when he wants to worship, where does he go? He goes to the church. When a Jew wants to pray, he has to go to the synagogue. When we want to pray, anywhere we want. The whole world has been given to us as a place of worship to go pray to Allah, because we don't have to go to a structure. It's good to stand together as a ummah and pray together as one body. But if you can't, you can do it anywhere you like. In South Africa, we are only 3% Muslim. And I always talk about South Africa because that's where I'm from. I can't talk about other countries because I don't know as well as that. You cannot find a hospital, you cannot find a police station, a military base, a shopping center that does not have a prayer room. Can't find it. How did this happen? We're so few. Because we demanded it. We said to the people, you want to keep Muslims coming into your building? You want to have Muslims coming to your shopping center? You want Muslim business at your hospital? Then you better build a prayer room. At the airports, they've got prayer rooms. Tiny little holes where you can put 2 or 3 people in. A nice, decent size. You see, if you don't ask, you don't get. And if you don't put your foot down, no one's going to take you seriously. So you have to be strong and make sense to the people. In South Africa, we went to the businesses. Lots of the big businesses, like the franchises. No, like the fast food franchises. We went to the fast food franchises and said, we want halal food in your franchises. And they looked at us and said, well, we are such and such a franchise. We don't do halal. Well, they said, well, you better start doing halal. Otherwise, you're not going to get business. And what did they do? They made it halal. And they changed. Big companies, big name brands. So you'll find almost impossible to find not a halal name brand in South Africa, one of the big chains. All halal. 3% made it possible. So how did they do that? Because they believe that they are following the one true religion. When we had problems, who did we go to? We went to our Jewish brothers. And we said to them, listen, you and I are on the same boat. You kosher, we halal. Let's work together. Let's make sure all the shopping centers have halal and kosher meat available for those people who eat meat. And so they did that. So you can go to all the shopping centers. And you can go to all the name brand shopping centers where they have supermarket chains. And there's a halal section, even if it's just as small as this table. It's got halal meat. It's a step. So this is how you establish the religion of Islam where you are. You make a stand. You make it known to the people that if you follow Islam, it will be beneficial. Not just financially, not just spiritually, but in every avenue. And so this is what we see the importance of dawah is to inform people of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, inform about Allah, and inform them about Islam. Islam is about these things that can benefit them, because Islam is a belief system that incorporates halal food, incorporates good business practices. I've told you already, have I told you already? I'm sure some of you at home already have heard this, that every bank in South Africa has a Sharia department. We're only 3%. Yet, there's a Sharia department in every bank. So you can have your card in that. You know how many Christians have moved their accounts to the Sharia department? They're in the same bank, but they've got a Sharia compliant department. You get a different card. You get different credit. You get everything's different to the normal banking. They all went over to the Sharia department. The government sends their ambassadors. The ambassadors would be accounting department, public affairs, welfare. Who do they send them to? They send them to the Muslims and ask the Muslims, give us advice on how we can make this more successful. They're not sending him to the Christians. They're not sending him to the atheists. They're not sending him to the Communist Party. South Africa is the only country in the world that still has an active Communist Party. It's the leading party of our government. But it starts off with a prayer. So it's a different type of communism. Communists are supposed to be anti-religion. Our government supports religion. Islam has more rights in South Africa than any other religion. Why? Because we established Islam there. Because we took Dawah seriously. And so this is what we can do worldwide if we take it seriously. This is what's happening in America. Dallas has got a huge Muslim community, and they are taking America by storm. They are establishing Islam in one state at a time. You've got Dallas, which is becoming a stronghold. Ohio, that's becoming a stronghold. You've got New York, which is becoming a stronghold. Muslims are starting to wake up and take Islam seriously. And so this is what we see when we read in this narrative, that we have to follow the message that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ gave us, that we need to establish Islam in the lives of the people. And that when we establish that, this new belief system, that everybody will want to climb aboard, even if they don't follow Allah, even if they don't believe in the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and his teachings, they will love Islam. It's an entrance into the community. Even the Christians who say, we don't believe in your belief about the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. We don't believe in Allah, but we love Islam. That's what they tell us in South Africa. The rabbi who is right where I live, a few meters from where I live, I see him. I speak to the head of the kosher section. Almost every day I see him. He's there. He says, one thing I do is I love Islam. I don't agree with what you say, but I love Islam. You see what we can do? We can establish that our job is not to only convert people to Islam. It's also to give them a positive reflection and attitude towards Islam. Allah calls people who He wants. Our job is simply to present Islam. And our first job is to present Allah, the Prophet, and the religion, the belief system. They can choose what they want to do with that. When we look at the relationship between the early Muslims and the church, very different to today. Why was that relationship so close at that time? Because Christianity looked nothing like it does now. Those Christians were not like the Christians of today. That's why sometimes you can get confused when we see the verses where it says you can marry people of the book, you can marry. It's different now because they are committing out and out shirk now. But in those days, it wasn't established as it is today. There was no Trinity running around. Very few had established the Trinity into their religion. Some of them had, some of them believed, but there were a lot of them that weren't. So Christianity was very different to the way it is now. But Allah has given the message to all people of all the world. Dawah and the message of Islam is not just for Muslims, it's for the whole of humanity. Sharia is not just for Muslims, it's for the whole of humanity, if they want to agree with Islam or not. Justice has been not just for Muslims, it's for the whole of humanity. So when we take the message, it's true what it says on Peace TV, the solution for humanity. Because it's not just for Muslims, it's for non-Muslims too. If they choose our banking system, it's because they've got a brain, they can figure it out for themselves, it makes sense. Let's go to the Muslim banking because it's safer. If they want to eat halal food and they say it, I cannot tell you how many chefs have told me this, non-Muslim chefs, the food just tastes better because it's been bled properly. The animal hasn't got all those impurities in. In my area where I live, I've told you this before, no one eats pork. I think they're going to come and put me down one of these days. And they're going to find me and they're going to say, you're responsible for the failure of our sales in pork in the area that you live. Because I put the fear of, into the people about what you're eating. what the rubbish they're eating, they stop eating it. So we can make a difference where you are. Today at home, you can make a difference. Have a look at how genuine Islam is and see how Allah has established this religion, not just for Muslims, for the whole of humanity. All the different facets that make up Islam. So this is all the time we have for this week. So make sure you join us again, same place, same time. So for me, Areeb, and those in the audience here, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.